I've talked about how much I really enjoyed Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and how I admired the talent of each of those four members. In previous episodes, we've looked at the solo career of two of them. We've looked at Graham Nash and Stephen Stills, which a bunch of you like because it's one of my most popular episodes, the one on Stills. Well, for this episode, let's turn our attention to the most outspoken member of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and the guy that two of the group won't even talk to anymore. And of course, that would be David Crosby. Let's drop the needle. There's only one other rock star who's had a tumultuous life like David Crosby, and that would be Keith Richards. But when you look at Keith's life, it's kind of mild compared to David's. David first found fame when he teamed up with Jim Roger McGuinn, Gene Clark, Mike Clark, Chris Hillman as part of the Byrds. They had just received a demo of a song by a young folk singer named Bob Dylan. So they took and recorded an electric version of Mr. Tambourine Man, and it became a huge hit. Crosby played on the first 5 Byrds albums, but was fired after he played on stage with the Buffalo Springfield at the Monterey Pop Festival. But Crosby obviously made money with the Byrds because after he got fired, what did he do? Well, he went and bought a 59-foot sailing ship and sailed all over the Pacific and the Caribbean. And he wrote many songs on that ship, including Wooden Ships. When he's back in LA, he meets Graham Nash and introduces him to Steve Stills. And they quickly form a trio and become Crosby, Stills, and Nash and release that incredible first record. And shortly after that, Neil Young joins the group. Around this time, Crosby's longtime girlfriend, Christine Hinton, dies in a freak automobile accident. And this sends David deeper into a spiral of depression and drugs. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young had a very splintered career, with Young leaving and then coming back and then leaving, while Crosby, Stills, Nash soldiered on. Breaking out on his own in 1971, David releases his first solo album, If I Could Only Remember My Name. Although he's joined by Nash, Young, parts of the Jefferson Airplane, and the Grateful Dead, and even Joni Mitchell, the album was a disappointment and was panned at the time, but history has been rather kind to it. And now, 50 years later, David has released an anniversary edition of that record. According to Wikipedia, in 2010, this album was listed as the second best album ever made by the Vatican City newspaper. Just think about that. The number 1 album, in case you're wondering, was the Beatles' Revolver. But David really wasn't into his solo career. He joined back up with Graham Nash, and they went out on the road, and they recorded a number of albums together and had some hits. In fact, it took David 18 years to record his second solo album, and it took me a while to get the joke in the title of the album. Remember, his first album was called If I Could Only Remember My Name. Well, this album is called Yes, I Can. But sadly, it doesn't sell. 4 years later, he releases Thousand Roads. He only wrote one song. He co-wrote one with Phil Bollins and one with Joni Mitchell. But it doesn't sell either. And like Keith Richards, David has had his run-in with drugs. He is a lifelong advocate of marijuana, and has even said, all those hit songs, every one of them, I wrote them all on cannabis. He got heavily into heroin and cocaine and spent a number of months in prison in Texas. He got arrested in New York after he checked out of his hotel room and then went back because he had left his drugs in the room. David claims spending time in jail made him go cold turkey and get off of heroin. But he still smokes pot to this day. Graham Nash stayed a very close friend of David Crosby's through all the ups and downs. But something has happened, and that relationship is now shattered. And Graham refuses to speak to him. David admits he has a tendency to piss people off, and that would include Neil Young, who also will not speak to David Crosby. In 1998 and 1999, David is the sperm donor for Melissa Etheridge and her partner. Melissa had a daughter and a son. Now, Crosby may have been prolific in some ways, but it sure took him a long time to get around to doing another solo album. 21 years to be exact. Out of the blue, he releases his fourth solo album, titled Crosby, recorded with his long-lost son, who had been put up for adoption as a kid. His son James, who coincidentally is also a musician, decided to seek out his biological father, and when he discovered it was David Crosby, they got together and they actually started making music together. David's next solo album is called Lighthouse, and it sells. For his sixth solo album, he reunites with his son James, and they record the album Sky Trails. But it doesn't chart. He quickly follows this with another album, Here If You Listen, which includes a remake of Joni Mitchell's Woodstock. But it doesn't chart either. But that doesn't faze Cros. He's on a roll. In over just 6 years, he lets loose with 5 albums. In 2019, a movie called David Crosby Remember My Name, which was a documentary, was released to positive reviews. And in 2021, he releases his 8th solo album, For Free. It's critically well received, and it sells. Now, I must admit, after his first solo album, and then the albums that he had with Graham Nash, after those, I sort of lost track of David Crosby. And now that he's released all of these newer solo albums, I haven't really listened to him. But the reviews have been great. Some are actually saying David is making the best music of his career. So I'm going to have to dig him out and listen to him. COVID hit David Crosby very hard. Now, he didn't catch it, but he had to stop touring. And he's been very vocal in how musicians do not make money off of any of the streaming services. So when he couldn't tour, he wasn't making money, and he was getting into dire straits where he actually believed that he was going to have to sell his house. But all that changed when he sold his publishing rights to his friend, Irving Azoff, giving David financial security. If you want to find out what a crusty guy David Crosby really is and have a few laughs at the same time, check out his video magazine for Rolling Stone called Ask Cros. It's a hoot. You can't dismiss David's contribution to music over the years. From the classic era of the Byrds to the soaring harmonies of CSN and CSN&Y, to the joyful pairing with Graham Nash, to the reunion with his son and subsequent solo albums, David is certainly one of the best-known voices and songwriters to enter our ears. In spite of all the turmoil, the drugs, the arrests, the broken friendships, the music still endures. And at 80 years old, so does David Crosby. And if he can keep a rockin', I think we all can. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.